Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Missouri MUFON monthly presentation. I'm Margie Kay. I'm the Assistant State Director for Missouri. And this evening, we have a good presentation by Larry Tyree. Larry, of course, used to be the Chief Investigator for Missouri, and now he is a field investigator in Illinois, but he is a video and photographic analyst. He analyzes our evidence on video and photos, and he just actually did one for me yesterday and today, and found some interesting things. Larry's got a very long resume, and he is always willing to help when needed, especially with analysis. And I'm not sure how many investigations he's done. I will send it over to you, Larry, and you can give some more information about yourself and then start the presentation. And if everybody else would please mute and turn off your video.
Okay, well, as to how many investigations I've done, gosh, I haven't even kept tally for a while. I think it's probably over 700, but last time I was counting, it was somewhere around 450, and I know I've done a bunch since then, so. Okay, well, let's proceed with this topic. I guess the first question is, you might be wondering, why did I create this presentation? And already this slide is not moving. Okay, great. Why it was working fine just a moment ago. There we go. I don't know why that didn't happen. Okay, most of us know about incursions of UFOs into missile silos and secure military areas. This will not be a repeat of those stories. Since 2023, I have investigated 20 Illinois MUFON cases. 7 of the investigations were cases which had nuclear facilities or an Air Force base nearby. That represented 35%, just a little over a third of the total cases. 13 of the cases were IFOs. They were all explainable objects. Of the 7 unknown category, every one of them, 100%, were near nuclear facilities. So when I realized that, I got to wondering how many other cases in the state as well as the country were near nuclear facilities. And this presentation is the result. And I've listed the 7 there, and I won't particularly go into any detail on them right now. But I will cover about 4 or 5 of them later in the presentation, just to give you an idea what they were like. So in Illinois, there are 6 nuclear plants, and you can see them with a circle around that county. So Ogle County, Rock Island County, LaSalle, Will, Grundy, and DeWitt. And there's a total of 11 reactors in those 6 nuclear power plants. So 32% of all unknown Illinois UFO cases in MUFON are near nuclear facilities, it turns out. That's throughout history, through the whole time period. In the state of Illinois, there are 102 counties with 1,056 unknown MUFON cases. 82 counties not near nuclear facilities had 720 unknown cases. That's 8.7 reports per county. 20 counties were near nuclear facilities and had 336 unknown known cases. That's a rate of almost 17 reports per county. You can see that there's a higher number of cases of UFOs visiting nuclear facilities than there are of the rate of regular visits to where there's no nuclear facility. That's almost 2 times higher, 1.93 times higher. Um, so that's seemed pretty substantial. What is it nationally? There was a study done a few years ago um, of 164 counties in the nation that had nuclear facilities in those counties, a total of 8,495 reports. And that was compared to 164 counties with no nuclear facilities. And what the author of the report did, the study, he matched those counties by populations so that they would be very close to statistically the same kinds of situations and regionally. They didn't take one county, say in California, and meet and compare it to a county in New Jersey, for example. They kept them in that same region to try to keep all things closer to equal. And in those situations with no nuclear facilities, it was only 33 reports per county. So we see that there's 61% of the cases were near nuclear facilities nationally. Now that's higher than say what I just showed you in Illinois. That's because nationally there are some counties that have um, quite more facilities, just because you may have a, a well, there's all the Air Force bases. There's quite a lot of facilities that are related to the nuclear industry, to the weapons programs, and so on. And so it gives a higher number uh, than you would find in the average state. So that's why there's a little bit of discrepancy. Um, so anyway, it's about twice high, 1.56 higher, one and a half times, I mean, higher rate. There are some very, very well documented incursions by UFOs at nuclear facilities. And this is a list of some of the most well documented. In fact, this is the list of the well documented ones. But that's by no means the whole thing, the whole shebang. There certainly are many others that just have not been uh, written up, or for whatever reason, the information has been kept close to the vest. Uh, and so I did this by decade just to kind of get an idea. Just in this group of well documented incursions, in the 40s, there was one. In the 50s, there were four. In the 60s, there were five. In the 70s, there were 10 incursions. In the 80s, four. And in the 90s, two. And just to give you an idea of how variable it can be. So here's UFO activity at ICBM sites on one base, just one base only. And this is Warren Air Force Base. It was the information that was logged by the Air Force personnel. This was on August 1st, 1965. And from the logbook. And so at 1:30 a.m., now this is a very unusual day because up to 60 UFOs happened just within a space of about 3 hours. At 1:30 a.m., several UFOs and a large circular object. 1:45 a.m., 7 UFOs. 2:50 a.m., 14 UFOs. 3:17 a.m., 1 UFO 90 miles east landed. 320, 7 UFOs, 325, 6 UFOs, and they were all stacked on top of each other, which was really strange. 3:27 a.m., there was 3 UFOs, 3:28, 1, 3:35, 5 UFOs, 3:40, 5 UFOs in various configurations moving around, but 3 of them were stacked on top of each other. 4:05, there was 9 UFOs, 4:40, 1 white oval UFO. a total of 60 that they were able to record just in that one date for about 3 hours. Now, in the area in Cheyenne, which is a few miles away, um, on the 31st, um, radio station personnel fielded calls from the community, uh, people who had seen 75 UFOs on the 31st. This is the day before that logbook on at Warren Air Force Base. This is just in the community. The next day, the day that happened in Warren, you had 29 UFOs. The day after that, you had 44. I mean, if you just look at those numbers alone, the public had seen something close to 148. Now, there probably was some overlap. Um, but interestingly, if you look at August 1st, or the category of the citizens of Cheyenne down here, they called in 29. On the base, they knew of 60. And given the nature of the distances away, I think that the closest ICBM that is about 30 miles away, and the furthest was about 109 miles away. You see a big discrepancy just right there. So not all the ones that were necessarily seen by the public were at all seen by the UFO base, um, just a fraction. So when you look at the others, it makes you wonder, how many were there really? So it's probably at least 208 all told between both sets of data, and if not more. At any rate, this just shows you what could possibly have happened just in one location. And as I said, we don't have data from all of them. Uh, it does make you wonder, though. Now, here's the map of the area. And you notice at the far left here, here's the Air Force Base. Here's the city of Cheyenne. And then here's where all the silos are. And they have letters and numbers. The farthest away is right over about 109 miles, right around here. The closest is about 30 miles away, right around here. And there's only one that's actually just to the north, one silo. So you can see that this is quite a field. Uh, over 200 missiles are installed as a part of this system. So the next question we can ask ourselves about all this activity about UFOs visiting nuclear facilities is why? What what's the causative agent here? Let's take a stroll down memory lane. In World War II, from 1942 to 1945, Air Force personnel witnessed and in some cases filmed a new type of encounter. They were called Foo Fighters, and other terms were associated to them as well before Foo Fighters sort of started to take over. And they were seen by air crews all over the world during that period. They were especially seen by Air Force pilots and crew members over the European theater of war, but it also extended to North Africa, Southeast Asia, including Japan, and the West Coast of the United States. Few records were made, but one source lists 146 cases with detailed information. That's a little report called the Foo Fighter Files by Dominic Weinstein. Some photos and movies were made, of which the following that photos here are examples. It began in earnest, though, over Norway, Finland, and Sweden in 1933, well before the war started. And more than likely, this was because the NHIs knew that we were already beginning to dabble into atomic energy. More on that here in a minute. So at very least, 153 Foo Fighters were reported all over the world prior to nuclear bombs being deployed. Most, however, that were never reported. either intentionally or just not seen, I suppose. It's interesting. Foo Fighters were seen on D-Day, June 6th, Normandy. One person said it looked like a sausage, blunted on both ends. Others were seen in the Korean and Vietnam Wars as well. And so this is a phenomenon that does seem to follow uh, what we do. Prior to the war, there are very few historical files which record sightings of UFOs by humans. The few that exist span a couple of millennia. These are not generally well known to the public, but because of the advent of improved photography and that it's become mobile, it was easier to document new things by 1942. There is unfortunately no way to know how many sightings there were. There were at least 19 military sightings of UFOs before Pearl Harbor in 1941. For the first time that we've been aware of them, the occupants of those craft seem to be observing the human propensity to kill on mass scales and with improved technology during World War II. Warfare was hardly anything new because our history books are full of wars, and we know that anecdotally that there had been observations throughout history. Something had obviously changed, however. Without knowing it, we had extended the invitation, and non-human intelligence came to see. As a result of the war was the development, a result of the war was the development and evolution of nuclear energy from a concept into weapons of mass destruction. In 1934, Enrico Fermi developed the first nuclear fission reactor. This set the stage for the race to develop the first working bomb. And so, the fact that that he had uh, actually would have started before the demonstrating nuclear fission worked. Um, and of course, it's not a stretch to realize that NHIs were following that and were aware. So this is just a real brief little timeline. It's probably too small for many people to see, especially if this was a room. But some of the main points here. 1931, the first unidentified craft was seen worldwide. Now we're not talking about 1897 crash or other things like that. We're just starting to talk about just during the pre-war and war era. So that's why I'm saying the first one. Nuclear fission was created 3 years later, and the rise of Nazism. In 1941, Cape Girardeau crash, 41 miles west northwest of Paducah, Kentucky. A year later, Paducah was a munitions depot. Um, and then about 10 years after that, it became a uranium enrichment plant. Uh, and then the next year, in February 25th of 1942, the Battle of LA, and there's a photo there, one of the photos that was taken that night. For 1942 to 45, World War II, and of course, Foo Fighters became known at that time. Then on July 16th of 45 was the famous Trinity test. And incidentally, Oppenheimer actually witnessed orbs that at the test that day. August 16th of 45, 1 month later, was the San Antonio, New Mexico UFO crash. About 10 days earlier, though, was Hiroshima, and then 2 days after that, Nagasaki. And then, of course, the July 2 Roswell crash in New Mexico. In the 50s, we have the Korean War. July 12 to 29 in 52, we have Washington UFO flap. And there's that famous photo that was taken. And then July of 53, the Korean War ends after into the fourth year. 1960, we have the Cuban Missile Crisis. 65, maximum number of nuclear warheads at 31,255. And then in 65 as well, the Vietnam War, begins. Well, at least we enter it. It had been going on. And we didn't withdraw until 8 years later in 1973. In the 1980s, there was no war going on. I mean, it was the end of the Cold War, but that was mainly a relationship issue. Chernobyl it was when that happened in '86, the catastrophic explosion. And then we start back in the wars again in the 1990s. In 91, we had the Everett Storm War from January to February. And in 91 as well, the Soviet Union is dissolved. In 2001, of course, the 9/11 attack. And then October of that year, the Afghan war started. 2 years later, the Iraq war started. And the Iraq war continued on for 8 years. It ended in 2011. The Afghan war was still going on, and it didn't end until 2021. And in 2023, last year, we had the fewest number of warheads by that point down to 3748. So when you look at this whole period of all of these decades, there was a tremendous amount of conflict going on. And a lot of it either was directly involving nuclear weapons, if not the threat of use of nuclear weapons, almost always in the background. Now, it, this is a chart that shows the number of nuclear explosions, nuclear tests that were done around the world by decade. Of course, July 16th, the Trinity explosion. And then after Hiroshima, then there began to be a race to perfect atomic weapons and to get as many as each side could. And 80 years of nuclear explosions followed. Now, when we take a look at the number of UAPs near nuclear facilities per decade, um, the top line is the total number of reports. Um, the the orange color below it accounts with I took MUFON and UFOCAT data to make this graph. In the lower one, the orange line, that's with unknowns only for the MUFON data added into the UFOCAT data. So basically, even though I weeded out the the knowns, the hoaxes and so on, the graph is still the same. Basically, it still goes up and comes down as the top line did. And now, when we compare the nuclear tests by decade with the incidence of UFOs near nuclear facilities, we also notice that the lines follow each other. Over here, where you see the nuclear tests going up, you have down here, you see UAPs visiting nuclear facilities going up. When the tests go down, the visits to nuclear facilities go down. When it goes back up again, it goes back up again. And here it goes down on the nuclear tests, which is good, but there other conditions are causing the UAPs, the UFOs, to continue. In fact, it's getting much more closer to the peak back in the 60s. When we compare the nuclear tests by decade, we notice that these lines do follow each other. Now, perhaps we can see one of the important reasons why UFOs are here. They're obviously still very watchful. Now, when what is the worldwide UFO sightings in general? Well, this looks at UFOCAT and MUFON data together, and it was adjusted with MUFON for just the unknowns. UFO-CAT tends to be more reliable and has been sifted through. There's a little bit that may not have been, but all in all, the UFO-CAT data I have found to be pretty good. However, we have to, wherever we can, sift out and just keep only the actual studied, researched, and certified unknowns by UFO field investigators with MUFON. So that's why I do it that way, just so we have as close to the best data as we can have. And interestingly, these charts also seem to follow the same pattern uh, with the UAP visits. And let's just compare the the worldwide UFO sightings chart that we just looked at, which is this lower one, and we compare it to the nuclear tests per decade, and it's very similar, you know, just for this last part. And if we look at nuclear tests per decade again with UAPs near nuclear facilities, um, it also follows. And this chart basically looks at what is um, what are the numbers of cases of UAPs near nuclear facilities. UFO-CAT is the blue, and the orange is MUFON. Up at the top here, you see the total cases, and this is unfiltered. But in terms of, there were 166 were unknowns of that. So 41% of this figure. Um, but when you just keep look at this data, this is just the with unfiltered data right here. And then if we look at, so this is UAPs near nuclear facilities. This is UAP sightings total everywhere. How many UFOs were seen everywhere? Um, the number here for MUFON is unfiltered. Um, the actual cases down here is 118,000 MUFON cases. If you take away those that there was no assignation of shape or what it was. If you just look at just the ones that we can identify some kind of shape to, of that group of 118,000, 20%, 27% are unknowns. But even without being filtered, um, the number of UFO sightings, overall unfiltered, um, are 65%, UAPs near facilities, 64%. And for UAP sightings in general, 35% with MUFON and 36% over here near nuclear facilities as a function of the total. So it's just interesting just to say, did one have more? Well, no, they're pretty much following each other in the same percentages. What then is the effect of wars, if any, or what does it look like in terms of a time scale? Um, and can anything be gleaned from that? Well, what I've got here is the number of years of each of those wars. So, for example, World War II lasted about 4 years, and so that's what this is. And then the aftermath of the atomic bomb, maybe about 5 to 6 months during that period of time. Korean War, about 4 years as well. Vietnam, about 5 years here, 4 years here, spanning 2 decades. You also have the Cuban Missile Crisis that lasted, build up to it and so on, probably less than half of a year, but at least if I made it too small, you wouldn't be able to see it. Okay, and then as we've mentioned before, in the 80s, there really wasn't any war per se going on, but the only thing of note is the Chernobyl explosion. And then we have Desert Storm picking up here in the 90s, the Iraq War, the Afghan War, Iraq war ending, Afghan going on, and finally not ending until uh, in the 2020s. And once again, I decided, well, let's just compare all the UFO sightings with the wars, just to see if there's anything that can be gleaned from that. And you know, the only thing I can say about this period here, they were all fairly close to each other in numbers of years. One was a little bit longer, but it was happening during a time in which other forces were taking place. You have the tests, you have threats, and so on. And because you have threats of war, this probably fed into this slope here. Once again, you have the same dip. And then here, these would certainly be compounding factors for pushing it up higher, especially when the nuclear building of weapons was decreasing as well as the testing was decreasing. So these could be concomitant reasons why this has continued up. As we found out yesterday and today, the nuclear clock is actually at T minus 60 seconds from midnight. So that could be another reason because our propensity to be dangerous is strong, if not stronger and worse than it's ever been. So let's look at some of the cases, just a sampling of some of them. Some I worked and some others that come from UFOCat. Okay, in the first one here, um, there was a red sphere near the Clinton nuclear power plant on July 23rd of last year. The town was Monticello, Illinois. A witness was out driving with her significant other and her son, and they saw a red sphere in the sky and stopped to get out and look at it. The sphere was south-southeast from them at about 135 degrees and just barely seen because it was 3 degrees altitude. Initially, it hovered for about 20 to 30 seconds before moving in a path. And the object crossed to the west at 280 degrees and then started to ascend slowly, at which point the witness began the video. The recording began at about 33 degrees altitude and continued upwards from the area at about the star HIP 65474 in the constellation Taurus, and then continued ascending until it vanished at about 60 degrees. And at the right here, I've tried to capture that. So it started to ascend, but by the time they had moved to that location to get a better view, there was a field in between, and started the video. The object was going and continued up until it vanished. The object appears to have been near 1,700 feet in altitude due to a faint reflection on the clouds from its bright light. The cloud base was 1818 feet, and at 33-degree angle of observation, it was about a half a mile distant from the witnesses. And right here is uh, an image, a photo of the object. Oh, come on, it doesn't want to move now. There we go. So over here is where they were in the town of Monticello, and they first saw the object just south of them, just short ways. But then the object got up and moved towards the west, and from that point, it ascended up in the air. That sphere was about 15 miles away from the Clinton nuclear power plant when it ascended. It was also 23 miles away from the site of a previous Decatur nuclear power plant, which is now closed. And that would have been down over in this area, down to the lower left. This case happened on August 15th of last year. Uh, a bright orange sphere, called reddish as well, and it was near three nuclear power plants. The witness and his partner were driving and noticed a bright yellow orangish sphere. They got out and walked to the edge of a cornfield to see it better. The witness described seeing the object beginning around 5 degrees altitude and ending in the box of the Big Dipper, which at that time was about 21 degrees altitude. The object ascended, and toward the end of the sighting, the witness stated that the sphere increased in acceleration. Unfortunately, the witness didn't have any video or photos of what he saw, but he did do a nice uh, uh, digital rendition of what it was like. The previous case, as you saw just a moment ago, involved a red sphere. And when the image was shared with the witness, because it was so close in similarity, and it was just, a week or so, a week or 10 days later, um, he looked at it and said, "That's precisely the same object I witnessed." So for whatever reason, it maybe it was just a different one that came, or maybe it was the same one. Who knows? But the orange sphere was located within a crescent of three nuclear power plants. You have Dresden up here, you have Braidwood down here, and LaSalle over here. So kind of in a crescent area in which it was really close to quite a lot of activity. Um, you know, miles are nothing for one of these craft because we know they can go hundreds or if not thousands of miles in just an instant. So just being a mere 20 miles or 9 miles, whatever, is nothing. Plus, we don't know what their intentions are, either before or after. But the very fact that they're there says quite a lot. Now, here's one from the UFOCAT files. Um, the CE2 close encounter with physical effects. Witness described ground marks in the shape of a triangle, approximately 6 feet per side between each leg, a tripod, and humming noise. The landing site was in a forest. There was a dome on the underside that spun clockwise. The object shot straight up and disappeared. Incidentally, or coincidentally, the Seabrook nuclear power plant is 1.5 miles away to the southeast. This had an SVP rating of 344. First-hand, reliable source. The site visit was by a special analyst, and all parameters say it's unknown. So this report requires an unconventional explanation per the source, and it's a better than average report. Conclusion unknown. Here's a case that happened also last summer in 2023. A white sphere was seen at Braidwood. We just talked about that nuclear power plant. On Saturday night, August 12th, 2023, the witness was parked next to the Braidwood nuclear power plant in a parking lot next to the lake from the cooling tower. And actually, he was probably not supposed to be there, he confided, but he was able to just move the chain and go in. But he just wanted some solitude and wanted a dark sky area so he could observe the Perseids. The witness observed the object at its closest point directly southwest of his position, which was at 229 degrees when he saw it to the southwest. At approximately midnight 30 was when he first saw it. Then the white sphere was 170 feet distant finally, and approximately 6 feet off the ground. Uh, Let me just show the relationships. Here's where he was parked in this parking lot. This is the a lake that's related to the Braidwood nuclear power plant. And so he was here. You don't see it in this photo, but there's a little uh, uh, what's the term? It's a key, uh, uh, a wharf. Duh. And this object came from the west and that's what his little black line here, and stopped about right here. And that's 170 feet from the car, from the car here, and it was only 6 feet off the ground. And um, it had come from the tree line. You kind of see the tree line behind. Oh, now the laser pointer decides to work. The tree line was back over and it stretched over here. Anyway, so here's where his car would have been. We're out on over the lake now on that little um, pontoon, and approximately here is what the size of it would have looked like, and it was only 6 feet in the air. When the witness realized the object was approaching his position, he had a sudden amount of fear mixed still with curiosity. And then it continued on that straight path, got close to him, and it was still pulsating. And then it went dim one last time, and then it completely vanished, just right there, right on the spot. We've talked about Braidwood before, and Dresden and LaSalle. Well, he was right there at Braidwood. And of course, by being there, he's also close to the other two as well. So who knows what the intentions are, but we do know that it was certainly there over Braidwood while he was there. July of this year, silver tic tacker was seen by a witness. Uh, on Saturday, July 22, a witness was flying his plane um, over the Oak Forest, Illinois area. It's kind of the south part of Chicago. And when he saw a UAP shaped as a tic tac flying below his plane. Now, he didn't know what it was at the time. He after he saw the thing, he went back home, which is in Cincinnati, because he was flying his Piper from um, St. Paul to Cincinnati, and he'd never really spent much time thinking about UFOs or shapes, so he wasn't sure what to call that until he actually saw an image of a tic tac as a part of a group of different types of images of UFOs. That's when he finally realized what he had seen. Now, this tic tac was flying about 1,000 feet below his plane, and it was following a Southwest airline flight and it was mimicking the Southwest airline flight's velocity. The pilot was able to observe the tic tac for about 30 seconds as it neared his aircraft, and then grew larger, and then it disappeared beneath the left wing. Oddly, it was vertically oriented in the shape of a silver chrome-colored tic tac. Um, and at 4:53 in the afternoon, the apparent speed by which the planes were approaching each other were, well, you take the speed of the Piper, 143, plus 307 for the Southwest flight equals 450, was the apparent speed that they were coming towards each other at. At that time, the two planes were separated by about 10 miles. So here's the Southwest flight, and here's our witness. And then this graph shows what it would have looked like. This is 12,000 feet. He was at 11,500. The tic tac was about 1,000 below him. And then at 4,900 feet was the Southwest flight. So they were going this way, and the tic tac was mimicking the speed of that flight. By the time it got to be at about quarter the size of the moon, it would have been about 3.5 miles away from the witness. And that's when he was able to then, for 30 seconds, observe it as it got uh, larger and larger enough to be able to see what it was. And here's what it looked like. This is a photo he took from his inside of his cabin. And then he created this image of what the tic tac looked like, although it was silver chromed. He couldn't find a way to make this real shiny silver. But anyway, that's it, slightly bigger than that probably in reality, but that's good enough to get an idea of what it was like because it came from over here and then disappeared under his wing. So it got really close. And being where they're at up here, it was also not far from Dresden and Bradeville. This is an interesting factoid about the Chernobyl explosion. There was a red fire, a red sphere that actually visited Chernobyl, and it shot rays down and into the plant. Now, this is the part that exploded. April 26th of 86. Technicians reported a fiery sphere similar in color to brass within 1,000 feet of the damaged Unit 4 reactor during the height of the fire, about 3 hours after the initial explosion. Two bright red rays shot out of the UFO and were directed at the reactor. It hovered in the area for about 3 minutes, then the rays vanished and the UFO moved slowly away to the northwest. Radiation levels taken just before the UFO appeared read 3,000 milliroentgens per hour, and after the rays, the readings showed 800 milliroentgens per hour. Apparently, the UFO had brought down the radiation level. So um, it was something like this, but shooting its rays somewhere into the mix there and doing something you don't normally hear about. This is a case of another UFO cat case in Igloo, South Dakota. It was so named because the Black Hills, it was a Black Hills Ordnance Depot, and they built little mounds that looked very much like igloos, which is why they called that area Igloo. And this would have been roughly May to August of 1947. There were 10 objects in that area. Now, my little simulated image has a few more than 10, but that was close enough. SVP rating of 313. The source was a firsthand reliable source. The site visit was by an untrained person unfamiliar with the UAP phenomenon, but the conclusion is that the parameters support unknown. Over 200 depot employees witnessed 10 mysterious objects land too far away for them to approach. The objects stayed on the ground for some time. Obviously, they were able to see them. They departed one by one in formation at a great speed. And this was all documented by over 200 people. February 25, 1950, in Los Alamos, SVP rating. The source was a person, had a personal interview with the witness. It was done by the investigator. The site visit was by a skilled analyst. And the possible conclusion is that all parameters support unknown. The details are it was an aluminum disc, a silver colored disc appeared over a nuclear site at the Los Alamos facility. It was observed by AESS or atomic energy inspectors who were present at the time. The object hovered and moved as if it was observing the nuclear site, and suddenly it zigzagged and shot straight up. So we've covered quite a lot of stuff. Um, what are some of the learnings? There was very little UFO activity prior to our nuclear development. Once we created nuclear weapons, NHI interest began to really skyrocket. Apprehension is probably more than just interest. The arms race caused an increasing race of UFOs, and the pace has not slackened. It has gotten far greater. Perhaps the real learning from all of this is maybe we really are the cause of the massive influx of UFOs. Not maybe, it seems pretty obvious. We are the cause of all of this. And that's kind of the learning that I came to. And that's the presentation.
Thank you very much, Larry. That was very interesting. I'm going to open it up to questions if everyone wants to unmute and put your video back on. If anybody has a question, let me change my view here.
Well,
Go ahead, Debbie.
Larry, did you watch the congressional hearings yesterday?
No, but I saw the summary that was sent out today on it after the fact.
They lasted a little more than 2 hours. I came home last night, watched them late last night on YouTube, but Lou Elizondo brought up exactly what you're talking about on how there is a lot of UFO activity in and around nuclear plants. He
Yeah.
talked about that. And for anybody listening, if you haven't already watched the hearings, they're very, very worthwhile to watch, except for Mr. I think it was Gold from NASA. Yeah, he denied a lot, but the rest of them, it's very, very, very interesting, and they did bring up exactly what you were talking about.
Larry, does it seem
Yeah.
like there's more interest in power plants than there is in weapons?
No, it's all part of the same thing. It's I we don't happen to have any weapons here in Illinois, and so power plants
That
is
you
the only
know of.
thing. Well, there used to be. There used to be. They've all been, as far as I know, they've been removed. That was back in the, gosh, 70s, I think, 70s to 80s when they were capped off and closed down. But they've proliferated in other areas, although they have been taking them down over time since the height of the 1960s. So yeah, it's interesting that if it's anything to do with nuclear, they visit. I mean, you obviously we know about 3 Mile Island, we know
Yeah.
about Chernobyl, so you can understand why they would still consider nuclear power plants to be problematic. Are
Yeah.
they doing maybe just spot checks to make sure everything looks okay? Who knows? Who knows? If I was
Okay.
in their shoes, maybe I would be too. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Anybody else have a question or a comment?
Larry, are you going to write a book on this? Did you say that at the beginning?
I hadn't thought of that. No.
You should. This is very,
Yeah.
very important.
Well,
I agree.
it seems like it's just a such a duh thing that when we proliferated, they came. When we proliferated all the weapons, they started coming, and they've come and come and come, and there are obvious. Even in the free book, uh, the where it talks about the concern that NHIs share with uh, experiencers. A high percent has to do with the ecology of this planet, but also is the concern about our ability to kill each other uh, and what nuclear weapons can do, because apparently it has effects way beyond just our world. It evidently has an effect elsewhere too. And we just don't know enough to realize how bad it is. So yeah, I don't know. It would be an interesting topic, but I've certainly once it hit me that, oh my gosh, every one of these cases that I've worked on over the last year that were unknowns, they were all nearby to nuclear power plants. And I had never realized that. I knew that when some of those that I showed happened to be, oh, this is near a power plant. Oh, we're near 3 of them. What's going on here? And I just couldn't believe it. I hadn't taken the time to actually look at all the others and see where they were located with respect to all that until, like end of May or something like that. I got to thinking, I need to look at this more closely.
Maybe that's something that all of us should be taking a look at. Maybe we need some maps of nuclear facilities so that we can add that to our reports. What say you, Debbie? Should we add another page to our reports?
Oh, it's also Air Force bases, not just nuclear
Right.
facilities.
True.
There's already a question on Form 30 for that. If, how far away are you from a nuclear plant or military base? So I think it's kind of covered.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, if,
Or a ship at sea.
yes. Well, if you think about it, just the fact that it's not a nuclear facility on an airbase, it's very likely a delivery system for a nuclear bomb or a support to a nuclear bomb system, like you have with the Air Force base there outside of St. Louis. And there's so much of it that is tied together that I think that's why the Air Force bases have to be looked at too. And we just haven't really thought of that much in the past. I mean, there's a number of them in Missouri. What, two major ones? Well,
No,
if you
White-
talk about the one just on into the Illinois side, but
Yeah. Well, we have Herman Power Plant, the nuclear plant, but we don't get a lot of
No, there's
sighting.
one in Callaway County. There's
Yeah,
Whiteman
right.
Air Base.
yes.
And I would not take money against there being weapons stored at Whiteman.
Oh, yeah, there have to be.
Yeah, there's no doubt with the B1, B2, B117. There's nuclear ordnance that's common to their mission profiles.
And then in terms of ordnance, we have a Sugar Creek that's been in operation for quite a long time. Not Sugar Creek.
Lake City.
Lake City,
Lake City.
Army
Lake
ammo,
City.
yes, they
Yes.
have a lot there. Mm-hmm.
The
That
hearing-
explains a lot.
I
The
know
hearing
UFOs have been
yesterday-
seen in there too.
Oh, yeah.
I have friends who've seen them. They just didn't get any photos.
The hearings yesterday, they were talking about submarines, how they were being followed. And I think at one point he said the question was asked about how many different accounts do you have? And he said, I think they said it was over 1,000. I mean, the different accounts, different reports that our submarines, nuclear submarines, are being followed around.
Yeah, that's to be expected, I guess. Yeah.
There was a missed opportunity there because I saw Admiral Gallaudet talking on a different YouTube podcast, and he was much more candid than he was in the hearing. And when he talked about that submarine that was being followed, he said that the object was going about 4 times as fast on YouTube, but he didn't specify that in the hearing. And the other thing is, when they thought that it was an enemy torpedo, that ship went almost at crush depth, which was their standard procedure to stop from being engaged, to try and get away from the torpedo strike. So it would have been the perfect opportunity to underscore the military risk. You've got this, you're being followed, and so you're taking this thing almost at crush depth. And then he made a point to say that it was an older sub. So everybody in that sub right near crush depth, it could have imploded and everybody killed. Just like the pilots were talking about, this object splits the formation. Well, you're talking 2 aircraft with a crew of 4 versus a nuclear submarine. So I thought the hearing was good. I agree with Debbie that gold was didn't have a whole lot of gold. Yeah,
Yeah, it didn't have a lot of gold.
Well, they've got to have one big debunker on there, right?
And NASA, of all people, with all the files that I'm reading for Project Aquarius, the Stringfield files and things that are coming out from astronauts, And I also, what surprised me more than anything was Lou Elizondo mentioning craft. And he mentioned different kinds of craft, including biological. That surprised me. They also asked about where they thought the entities were coming from. And he said a lot of them interdimensionally. And that's something new that I hadn't heard from him before. And then one other thing I wanted to bring up, go on YouTube and you can just type in Joe Rogan and Trump talk about UFOs. There was just a little snippet. I was kind of going through, just looking for things in particular, and I clicked into that. It's only a couple minutes, but Joe Rogan, when he interviewed Trump, they talked a little bit about the Kennedy files, but then Trump was the one that brought up UFOs. And then Trump mentioned something about there being life on Mars, and Joe Rogan goes, "Oh, no, there's no life on Mars." I thought, oh, this man was president, and he had top secret information. He has said he's going to be releasing some of this. And it seems to me that if a person who was a former president was on and mentioned about possible life on Mars, I would have just said, "Well, what do you know about that?" Well, instead of, "Oh, no, there's no life on Mars." Oh, he missed an opportunity there.
Yeah, he did.
So that's interesting. He also said something about he had a couple pilots in the White House that he had talked to, and he said these were really good young men and very credible, and that type of thing. And then also too, during the hearings, I think the last person that spoke said that Trump said that if he got elected, he was going to release a lot of this information. And I'm sure Ray heard that, and the gentleman said, "We're going to hold him to it." So he made the promise they're going to hold him to it, but he mentioned Mars. I mean, I thought that was interesting. Joe Rogan just cut him off and started talking about Fravor and I think the other one, Gross, that they had on his show, and I thought, oh man, you should have let him talk. He was revealing things and he cut him off and talked about himself. I thought, oh, nah.
Wow.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's supposedly 5 races of humans on Mars.
5 races of humans?
Yes.
You mean, or 5 races?
Yes, 5 different
races.
5 different races.
Types.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
there's
of us humans or of Martians that simulate. I mean, Martian.
They're humanoid. They're humanoid.
Humanoid, Martian humanoid, or Earth humans, or both.
Who knows? Who knows if there at one time there was interplanetary back and forth? Who knows?
Yeah, Joe Rogan could have asked Trump, and he blew it.
If we don't have anything else on UFOs and nukes, I'm going to stop the recording.